Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mini Books Podcast with your host, Gloria and Rogan. And today we are excited to dive into Special Book with you. We picked this one because it has really important lessons to share, and we can't wait to talk about them. So let's get started.
So we're diving into Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations.
A classic.
Yeah, one of those books I feel like everyone's heard of.
Right.
But to actually, climb that mountain of knowledge.
It's intimidating.
Well, intimidating, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, the view from the top.
Worth it.
Totally worth it. And that's kind of what we're here for, to unearth those nuggets of brilliance that are, buried within this book.
And you'd be surprised, some of these ideas, centuries old.
Right.
Still relevant today.
Totally. It's like he had this way of seeing the underlying structures of how economies work.
Yeah.
That, it still holds true.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts off with a concept that seems deceptively simple. Right?
Yeah.
The division of labor.
Okay. He lays it out in such a fascinating way. He asks us to imagine a pin factory.
Okay.
One worker doing every single step themselves might make one pin a day, maybe.
Okay.
But divide that process up, 18 distinct tasks, he says, each one done by a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
That factory can produce thousands.
Thousands, just from dividing up the labor.
Thousands.
It's mind-boggling when you actually stop to think about it.
Right.
But he goes beyond just, describing it. Right?
Yeah.
He digs into the why. Why does this create such a massive increase in efficiency?
So three primary factors.
Okay.
First, specialization equals dexterity. You become so good at that one little thing you do.
Right.
Second, it saves all that time lost switching between tasks.
Okay.
You're not going back and forth between different things all day. And then finally, this laser focus paves the way for innovation. When your whole world is that one task,
Right.
you're going to figure out ways to do it better and faster.
Makes sense. And like he points out, it's not just pins.
Right. Not
Any industry,
Yeah.
any profession, it's this intricate dance of these specialized roles coming together.
Think about the tech industry.
Well, yeah.
You've got software developers, interface designers, the marketing folks.
Totally.
They're all playing these crucial but very specialized roles in creating that final product.
Mm-hmm.
Or even something as complex as a global supply chain.
Right.
A single product. The pieces might be made all over the world, each one chosen for their specific expertise.
Right.
It's amazing.
It really highlights how interconnected we all are in ways we don't even realize, practically. Yeah. But let's bring this back down to earth for a second, right? Where do you see this in your own work, in your own life? It's got to be everywhere if you stop and think about it.
Oh, it is. Restaurants, hospitals, everything.
It's how things work, right?
Yeah.
And this is just the beginning with him, right?
Oh, yeah.
From this kind of foundational idea, he builds this whole incredibly insightful framework for understanding how wealth is created.
He does, which
Right.
we'll get into.
And that's where things get really interesting. Because as we're about to see, Smith had some truly revolutionary ideas about what drives economic growth.
Yeah.
And he really challenged the conventional wisdom of his time. Okay, so we've got this idea of the division of labor, right? This intricate dance of specialization leading to these huge leaps in productivity.
That's amazing.
But then he throws this curveball, this concept of the invisible hand.
Yeah, this is probably his most famous idea.
Right.
And very often misunderstood.
Yeah.
What he's basically saying is when individuals act in their own self-interest in a free market,
Okay.
it can actually end up benefiting society as a whole, even if that wasn't their intention.
So it's like this paradox almost.
Right.
Individual ambition somehow leading to this collective well-being. But he's clear, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's not saying people are inherently good
No.
or trying to be altruistic.
It's not about everyone becoming these selfless saints all of a sudden. He acknowledges that human desire
right.
to want things for yourself. Right?
Of course, yeah.
But his argument is that within a well-functioning market, that self-interest is guided, almost as if by an invisible hand, towards outcomes that end up being beneficial for everyone.
Interesting. He uses this great analogy in book 1.
Oh, yeah.
He compares country laborers and town mechanics.
Okay.
And he's saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he's basically saying that the country laborer accustomed to dealing with a wider range of challenges, right?
Right.
often possesses a more comprehensive understanding of the world.
It's like sometimes being forced to figure things out for yourself,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To deal with those unexpected situations, it can lead to a different kind of intelligence.
It's an interesting observation, for sure.
It is.
Okay, so how does this invisible hand thing actually work in the real world?
Okay, so let's say you're a baker, right?
Okay.
You wake up every morning. Goal is to bake the most delicious bread and sell as much of it as possible.
Okay.
You're not doing it from this like grand desire to nourish your community or whatever. You're doing it to make a living.
Right. It's work.
But in order to do that, you have to make your bread better than the other bakers in town.
Yeah.
You got to offer a good price.
Right.
Got to treat your customers well. So that self-interest within a competitive market,
Okay.
it forces you to improve, to innovate, to offer something that people actually want. Sorry to interrupt you guys. If you're enjoying this podcast, then don't forget to check out our official YouTube channel, Mini Books Podcast, and subscribe for more great podcasts like this one.
And the result is the community gets their delicious, affordable bread.
Right.
Even though that wasn't your, primary motivation.
Exactly.
It's like this beautiful, self-regulating system.
Now imagine that playing out across an entire economy.
Wow.
Thousands of individuals, businesses, all pursuing their own self-interest. But in doing so, driving innovation, creating jobs,
Yeah.
ultimately raising the overall standard of living.
That's a pretty powerful idea. But he doesn't shy away from the fact that there are roadblocks
Oh, absolutely.
on this path to building a wealthy nation.
Yeah.
And some of them are kind of surprising.
He was really wary of anything that stifled competition.
Ooh.
He actually had some pretty harsh words for apprenticeships and guilds,
Interesting.
which, those systems were meant to ensure quality craftsmanship,
Right, right.
But he saw them often being more about protecting the folks already in power.
It's like that old saying, it's all about who you know.
Right.
It's not really about, if you're actually good at the thing.
Exactly.
He recognized that as well-intentioned as those systems might be, they could also create these artificial barriers to entry,
Totally.
making it harder for new talent to emerge, to compete. And he gives this hilarious example in book 1.
Oh, yeah.
The absurdity of regulations that dictated who was allowed to make or repair coach wheels.
Seriously.
I know. Can you imagine?
That's wild.
It sounds like something out of a Monty Python skit.
Right.
Only certified wheelwrights allowed.
Only them.
No exceptions. It's no wonder he found it so absurd.
Yeah.
He saw these regulations for what they often were attempts to limit competition,
Right.
even if it meant higher prices, fewer choices for everyone else.
Yeah. And it's a theme that we see throughout history.
Oh, yeah.
We're still grappling with these issues today.
We are. Think about, debates over occupational licensing.
Oh, yeah. Good example.
Hairdressers, interior designers, you name it. It begs the question, are these regulations truly in place to protect consumers?
Yeah.
Or are they just another way to stifle competition, stifle innovation?
Right.
It's something to think about.
It is. Smith was centuries ahead of his time
It sounds like it.
in recognizing how regulations, while sometimes necessary, they can also be weaponized
Right.
by special interests to protect their own position. It's about finding that balance,
Right.
ensuring fairness, quality, but also allowing for competition and progress.
It's a balancing act.
Always is.
Speaking of things that require a delicate balance,
Yeah.
let's talk about wages.
Okay.
It's a topic that's front and center for all of us. So we've covered some serious ground here. We talked about how dividing labor can lead to huge gains in productivity, how this invisible hand thing can steer self-interest towards the common good.
Right.
And we've even touched on some of those, obstacles that can pop up along the way,
Yeah.
especially when competition gets stifled.
Yeah.
But there's one more thing I got to ask you about.
Okay.
And it's kind of unexpected from a guy writing in 18th century Britain.
What's that?
Colonies.
Ah, yes.
What do you have to say about that?
Well, you'd think someone in his position, right,
Yeah.
would be all for colonialism.
Right, right.
I mean, it was making Britain incredibly wealthy.
Totally.
But Smith, he saw through the hype.
He did.
Oh, yeah. He dedicated a huge chunk of the wealth of nations to basically dismantling the entire logic behind colonialism.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty radical for his time.
Oh, absolutely.
So what was he thinking?
Okay, so at the time, mercantilism was all the rage.
Okay.
Countries were obsessed with amassing gold and silver,
Right.
and they saw colonies as the key to doing that.
Yeah, makes sense. Get those resources right.
Exactly. They figured, why let other countries sell you stuff when you can just claim the land and take it yourself?
Right. Just cut out the middleman.
Exactly. But Smith, he saw the flaws in this. He pointed out that this mad dash for colonies, it often ended up distorting trade and leading to, an inefficient use of resources.
Interesting. So it's almost like counterproductive in a way.
In a way, yeah.
So how do you make that point?
Well, he uses this really striking example in Book 4.
Yeah.
He talks about the whole legendary search for El Dorado.
Oh,
This mythical city of gold
right.
that supposedly existed somewhere in the Americas.
Yeah, everyone was looking for that.
Everyone. And Smith's point was, people were so blinded by this allure of instant riches that they poured tons of resources into these expeditions that, more often than not, led to nothing but, hardship and disappointment.
It's like that old saying, a fool and his money are soon parted. Or, in this case, a whole empire.
Exactly. It's about chasing illusions instead of focusing on what actually creates wealth.
So what was he suggesting instead?
Okay, so instead of mercantilism, with its focus on hoarding wealth, he was a huge champion of free trade.
Free trade, okay.
He believed that nations should focus on what they could produce most efficiently,
Right.
and then trade freely with each other.
Gotcha.
Let the benefits of specialization and competition work their magic.
Interesting. So more of that invisible hand at work, just on a global scale.
Exactly. A rising tide lifts all boats. It's a much more sustainable and honestly a more equitable way to build wealth.
Wow. It's amazing to think how much ground we've covered. We started with, like, the inner workings of pin factories, and we ended up talking about free trade spanning the globe.
It's a pretty wild ride reading The Wealth of Nations.
It sounds like it. And even after all this, I feel like we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, for sure. This is a book that really stays with you. It makes you look at the world differently, question your assumptions, see those connections that are driving things behind the scenes.
I like that. So to our listeners, as you delve deeper into Adam Smith's world, keep your eyes peeled for those aha moments, those flashes of insight that make you see things in a new light.
Absolutely. And keep asking questions. What resonates with you? What surprises you?
Right. What will you explore further?
This journey of economic discovery, it's never really over.
I love that. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive into more book insights and key learnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Mini Books Podcast, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We're back every Sunday at 9 a.m. with new books and more to learn from. Until next time, take care, keep learning, and keep growing. Remember, this is Mini Books Podcast.